Fans of the Faceoff, welcome back to a return of the pod. Jake Lapin here along with Julian McKenzie. It is good to be back, boys and girls. Long time coming. Julian, how you doing, my man?
I haven't seen your face in so long. I missed you, buddy. What are you doing? What's up? You're in New York. We're in New Jersey now.
Okay, yeah, I'm in New York as of right now.
Okay, you're in New York.
Working in Jersey. Well, that's a good idea. Let's do a quick life update on the two of us. We finished up at Syracuse. That's why we haven't been doing podcasts in a while, as that would explain it. I had 6 more weeks than you did, obviously, and now I am with MLB Network as a broadcast associate. Started last week, and living in NYC, working in Secaucus in Jersey, but here and living in New York in my New York apartment right now is the new backdrop for the Face-Off. And what about you, Julian? What have you been up to?
So for me, I moved back home after school was over. I picked up a job as a part-time researcher for the CBC. And if you're obviously familiar with our Canadian networks, the CBC is our public broadcaster. So I work for the CBC Montreal affiliate as a researcher for the morning shows on the radio stations. So I do research for the morning show, CBC Daybreak, CBC Home Run, and I've also done a bit of work for the show based in Quebec City, Quebec AM. So basically I just book guests and research topics. Sometimes I pitch a sports story. It works out sometimes.
Give an example of a story you would pitch in Quebec.
So one story I pitched and I really wanted it to work out, and it looks as if it will. In Montreal, there was this Taekwondo grandmaster who immigrated to Canada from Korea in the 60s, and he's regarded as the man who introduced the martial art to Canada, and he ended up opening up this great school in Montreal, and he ended up coaching all of these great Taekwondo artists. And it happens that this kind of famous Montreal rapper who's really big on Montreal Expo stuff was a former student of his, and he's probably arguably one of the more higher profile students he's had just because of his name and all that and all the stuff he's done. He's also done acting as well. We're going to get him on this show called CBC Home Run, which, if you're in Montreal, by the way, you can listen to on CBC Radio 88.5, 3 to 6, Monday to Friday. We're going to try to have him on next week to talk about the Grandmaster, who unfortunately, as I mentioned, passed away. He was very old. I don't remember how old he was. Don't ask me for his exact age, but his funeral is next week. But yeah, no, that's an example of a story I pitch.
Sounds great. Would love to hear about it some more another time, but unfortunately, we cannot spend the entire return of the pod focusing on Montreal and the Expos no longer existing. We'll get to some baseball.
They'll be back
now, of course, but we got to start with what has been perhaps like maybe the most intriguing NBA offseason since the decision.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Wait, maybe not even when LeBron came back?
When LeBron came back was also a big deal. But the first time, I mean, come on, there was people burning jerseys, for God's sakes. It wasn't the same when he went back. It was more of like a, oh, that's nice kind of thing. But this summer, lots of big names on the move, all seemingly headed toward the West. And Julian, this is a little biased here, but we're going to start with one of the first moves that was made. It was actually a trade, and that was Chris Paul to my Houston Rockets. I want your thoughts on this first.
So the guy who we regard as arguably the best point guard of the last few years, no doubt in our minds, in anyone's minds, he's a Hall of Fame player, says, you know what, I'm going to go to Houston, and the Clippers execute this trade, and he ends up in an outstanding offense with the coach of the year and an MVP candidate alongside him in James Harden. And people are kind of worried about, I mean, this is what I was seeing from the initial reaction. People were worried about, oh no, you had Harden working out at point guard. Now you have another point guard there. What are you going to do? Trust in Daryl Morey, man. You don't make these trades without having a little bit of common sense and thinking, hey, you know what? Can these two guys coexist? I mean, once upon a time, James Harden was killing it at the 2 spot, right? You know better than I do, right? He was killing it at the 2 spot. He was a great player. There's definitely a reason. He's definitely going to be fine there. And to have Chris Paul at point, and you know this just as just as good as I do, that Mike D'Antoni said that there's not going to be too many instances, if at all, where you're not going to have at least one of them on the floor. This could really work. This could really work for the Houston Rockets. This could be a dynamite partnership between two guys who I understand they're going to want the ball to a certain extent, but I mean they're going to find a way to share it. You don't have two dynamic players not coexisting. I just think this in my mind, two dynamic players like Harden and Paul. I think this is just going to work. I mean, Paul's in a situation where he's on a team that could maybe get out of round 2. And as a distributor, I think he's going to work well in that offense. And James Harden, I don't think he minds at all if he's going to have to play at the 2 position. Once upon a time, back when he was up at, once upon a time, he did want to not play point. He really wanted like Ty Lawson there. So just to kind of offset and just be more of a slasher type like he was at OKC. This is fine. This is going to be fine. That's my thoughts and feeling about it. I think Houston is going to do really well with this move.
I mean, look, Lawson was an absolute disaster. But,
it ended up being a disaster, but I mean, like,
Chris Paul obviously better than Ty Lawson at many things.
A massive upgrade.
But it's a little bit perplexing because we're in a situation where we just found out that James Harden is awesome with the ball in his hands at all times. Let him run the point guard, and he'd have the greatest offensive season in the history of the sport. Like, that just happened. And now, all of a sudden, we're saying, okay, let's bring in the point god, Chris Paul, a guy who also demands the ball at all times. That's the only way he operates. So it's a little bit perplexing at first, but obviously it goes further than that. I mean, both guys have outwardly said they wouldn't mind playing off the ball more. I don't know, at least give them some more rest. I think D'Antoni, one of the first things he said on the day they announced the trade was that they will have an elite point guard handling the ball for all 48 minutes of every game, which is exactly what I wanted to hear because you need to stagger these guys and both give them their opportunities to do their thing with the ball in their hands. And lastly, is what Daryl Morey said is his strategy right now is to get as many USA basketball players on his team as he can, as in Team USA, obviously.
Yes.
We've reached an era in the NBA where if you're going to compete with the Warriors, you have to stockpile talent on talent on talent, and then you can worry about the fit and the dynamics and personality clashing and all that later. He got another top 10 player in the NBA. That's the bottom line for right now. And he has the coach of the year, Mike D'Antoni, who revolutionized the sport in terms of offense at the helm. I think D'Antoni will figure out a way, maybe not right away, but he will figure out a way to get these two to coexist into an insane offensive unit on the court, with or without Melo or Ryan Anderson, to be determined. It does sound like Melo is coming. We'll get to that in just a second because you know me, I've never been shy to talk about Melo.
That's a guy you don't even consider to be a top 50 player. Why are you hyping up Melo all of a sudden?
No one said 50. I said 40. And I will defend/qualify that in a little bit. But last thing I want to say on Paul and Harden is just if D'Antoni can somehow find a way, here's how I imagine it. It was if you literally divide the court in half and you're playing 3-on-3 and you have Harden and Paul waiting to run a pick and roll, you're going to have shooters in the corners. You're going to have Ariza. You're going to have Gordon, potentially Anderson or Melo, and then Capella catching lob after lob. I think they can find a way to make this work where every single defender has to be ready and has to react to multiple spots on the floor depending on where you space your shooters, and just dividing that court in half and having two pick and roll guys ready to go. I think it could be lethal once they kind of figure out all the kinks and gears. That's my take on it. I don't think, like I said, I don't think they're gonna gel right away. And they did lose a lot of pieces. Like, look, Lou Williams, I mean, they only had him for half a year. Good guy to come in and hit some shots off the bench. But
they have a better sixth man in Eric Gordon than Lou Williams.
Exactly. They already have that man, and that sixth man in Eric Gordon, like you said. And Sam Decker, nice young potential, but he wasn't really helping them last year. He actually got hurt in the playoffs, and it didn't even before the playoffs, and it didn't even really matter for the most part. And then, you know, Nene's coming back. I like that, but they shipped off Patrick Beverley, and Patrick Beverley was perhaps. He was easily a Houston fan favorite, one of my favorite players for sure. You love his tenacity, and he's been often noted as a guy as you love him if he's on your team, you hate him if he's on another team. I don't feel that way at all. He's on the Clippers, and I still love him. I think he gets a bad rap because he hurt Russell Westbrook, and he gets in fights on the floor. But off the floor, I think he's an outspoken guy that people don't realize because they don't see him off the floor. He's a good person who fought his way into the NBA, played overseas, was ignored after being drafted late in the second round, didn't make the team out of training camp in LA, and he scrapped and fought his way into the NBA, and that's the only way he knows how to play now. And I think he's unfairly judged as his on-court personality also representing his off-court personality when that's completely far from the truth. So Patrick Beverley will be missed, but that's a piece you give up in a heartbeat to get Chris Paul.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened.
I got to say, okay, one thing, though. The Rockets, with the team they have now, in a series against Golden State, how far does Houston go? I mean, I don't think anyone's jumping over the moon saying Houston's going to somehow upset Golden State. Is it a 5? Is it 6 now? Is it 7? I think it's 6.
Yeah, I'd say somewhere between 5 and 6, probably even closer to 5. They're still not even near Golden State in terms of on paper, not to mention all the time Golden State has had to gel. They have another year of chemistry under their belt now with Durant. Like, they're only going to get better. It's not like they're going to deteriorate. They're going to get better as they get more and more chemistry. And it's just also, I think Steve Kerr started to figure out towards the end of the finals that Steph and Durant pick and roll is literally unstoppable. And I think the only reason he didn't use it that much is because it just wasn't that fun winning by 30 every single game. Honestly, that's how good it is. And I think the Warriors, like I said, I've said this on Twitter, and you can quote me on this. I think the next team to win the Western Conference other than Golden State will be Minnesota. And I think that's in like 6 years down the line. I really do.
Wow.
I really do. But in the meantime, the Rockets had James Harden. They figured, you know what? We're going to extend this guy. Massive extension, by the way. And I'm very much okay with it. I can get your thoughts on that in a second. But we got a guy who's a top 5 player in the league. We're not going to roll over and die. And our only other option is to acquire whoever else we can to try and take down Goliath. And while I don't think it'll work in the end, I think it was the only choice the Rockets had to make, and so that's what they did.
Pretty much. I mean, having a guy like James Harden, and now you find yourself in a position where you have Chris Paul, you are automatically a top 3 team in the Western Conference. You're not some middling team in 4, 5, 6 trying to find a way to beat Goliath. The Houston Rockets, with this lineup, are guaranteed to compete pretty much every single year. And I mean, hey, who's to say the injury bug doesn't somehow strike the Golden State Warriors at an inopportune time, and all of a sudden a series that's supposed to go 5-6 ends up being 7, and oh, whoa, did Houston just upset Golden State because Kevin Durant wasn't in or Steph Curry wasn't in? Of course, you're going to get the Warriors haters who are going to cry, and they're going to be like, oh, we didn't have our best player. Maybe Kent Paisley hits us up and says, hey, we didn't have Steph Durant. Word to, Kent Paisley. Word to the Paisley par, by the way. I got to plug him. But anyway, no, the Houston Rockets, all I'm saying is they're a top quality team in that Western Conference, which is stacked enough as it is. They can fight in the series against Golden State. They might not beat them, but I think they have a team that could very well fight against them in a conference final, mind you.
Yeah, I think they're at least built to prevent 16-0 from happening again. which,
I think so.
or excuse me, 12-0, I guess, to get to the finals, 16-1 total. But yeah, I mean, look, you could, of course, you could get, oh, blah 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 was injured, Durant was injured, Steph was injured. Look, the Rockets' only championships were when Michael Jordan was playing baseball. So I like Rockets fans, I'm sure, are used to hearing that. But at least they were prepared. You know, other teams can do it too. If someone gets injured, that's not really a valid excuse outside of Golden State, I don't think, to take away from a team to win in this era that will be so dominated by Golden State. And this is all hypothetical, of course, talking about an injury. The last thing I want to say about this is it's interesting because there are a lot of Harden versus Kawhi arguments and comparisons, and I think they're all valid. I think you can make a very good case for either being better than the other. But in this instance, Kawhi Spurs, even with Kawhi injured, took down Harden in a very disappointing end of the series for both Harden and the Rockets. Just completely disappeared with Kawhi injured in overtime Game 5, and then a miserable Game 6 that makes me sick just even talking about it.
Damn.
But I think it's interesting. I think it's worth noting that even though Kawhi's Spurs won that series, Harden's Rockets won the CP3 sweepstakes. CP3 was also very much considering going to San Antonio, where I think he would have been a great fit. I think him and Popovich could have done some scary things with that system. And he decided to go to Houston instead and play with Harden. And I think it's more of a dynamic personality and friendship banana boat type of thing, whatever you want to call it. But I think Harden seriously has that in his favor over Kawhi, if that's the only thing he has in his favor over Kawhi, which I don't think it is. But even if you were going to argue such, I don't think you could argue that in this instance, in this NBA where GMs kind of take a step back and the players decide what they want to do, LeBron and Wade and Bosh all decide they want to play together. I think Harden has a serious advantage on Kawhi in that regard.
I really want to kind of delve in on this, but I realize we can't do a whole podcast delving into the Houston Rockets. But all I'll say is that
I'm okay with it. Like,
we can't do that. I'm not feeding into your homerism. All I'll say is that if the Rockets play the Spurs in the coming playoffs, the Rockets will beat the Spurs in a 7-game series. It may not even go 7. It may just be 6. But I think the Rockets will beat the Spurs. I think the Spurs might not even get out of round 2 this year.
Julian says Rockets will beat the Spurs in 7. July 13th, 8:48. Mark it down, everybody.
Yep.
Let's move on to a few more moves. I think the next biggest one here is Paul George going to OKC for scraps. For scraps. I mean, we just spent an entire season talking about how terrible the Thunder role players are. And they get Paul George for Sabonis, Oladipo, and no picks, Julian. Not even a pick. Explain that to me. How does that happen?
It's the funniest thing in the world. And we all laughed at once that trade happened. Danny Ainge, who had all these picks. And I thought, hey, and remember all those Boston Celtics fans who thought, hey, man, we can go get Paul George. Hey, man, we can go get Jimmy Butler. They still ended up with Gordon Hayward, but come on, man. You get Paul George, a dynamic player who, yes, he said he was thinking of going to LA, but now he's backtracking on it and saying, you know what, I'd be crazy to leave a winning situation in OKC, which is the right thing to say. I'm sure for a negotiation standpoint, but just in general, just the right thing to say. It's just hilarious. Think about it. Even worse, if Paul George says, you know what, I like OKC enough that I want to sign an extension, oh my God, that trade ends up being a lot worse in my mind. I mean, look, Indiana loses a franchise player in Paul George. And it's one thing if you lose him for, I don't know if this rumored deal ended up being real or not, but like 4 first-round picks. That was like a rumor that had spread about like the Atlanta Hawks offering 4 first-rounders for Paul George. But it's one thing to lose a franchise player for a deal like that, or you offer up such a haul for a guy like that. Maybe something on the heels of the Clippers Rockets trade for CP3. But you lose a franchise player like Paul George for a depth forward in Victor Oladipo. And imagine he signs off. I mean, and he ends up killing it in OKC. I'm not saying he's going to end up winning championships, spoiler alert, but come on, man. Like, so disappointing in my mind. If I'm an Indiana Pacers fan, especially if Paul George stays in OKC, I'm sour at the fact that you don't get more for Paul George. And Kevin Pritchard, the GM there, his hands are practically tied because his asset pretty much says, you know what, I want to go to LA. I want out. He pretty much, clears out the mystery here. I mean, part of me still feels he'll still go to LA, but now if he actually stays in OKC, wow, if you're an Indiana Pacers fan, you get jerked. You're getting jerked around. But I mean, it's going to work out for OKC, though.
I don't know. How good do you think OKC really is now? Do you think they can contend with the Warriors or Rockets or Spurs? Do you think they're even in that top 4 echelon?
I think they have a chance of fighting to be a top 5 team. I mean, the Warriors are there. The Rockets are still, in my mind, like I said, they're number 2.
Right.
You can never count out the San Antonio Spurs. Even though the Utah Jazz have lost Gordon Hayward, they're looking to stock up their roster as well. That's a team that's also going to fight in that top 5. The Clippers are going to probably fall out, so that will probably help OKC. But that's not a team in my mind that's saying, you know what, they're going to the finals this year, they're going to the conference final this year, and they have arguably the most exciting player in the game in Russell Westbrook. I mean, he can only do so much by himself, and Paul George will help offset some of that workload. But as dynamic as both those two players are, see, here's the thing. Houston has those 2 amazing players, but they have the best coach. They have the coach of the year and outstanding core of role players who are able to distribute the ball and shoot, and they're shooters. OKC, it's not the same core. You're not going to get the same type of results there. Different teams, obviously, but that's a team that, if they're a top 5 team, that's about where I see them finishing. I don't think they're good enough to compete with a Golden State or even a Houston.
I mean, I have my concerns. I still think they get in the top 5 for sure.
Yeah.
Based on kind of what other teams are doing. Utah's going to fall off. Clippers are going to fall off, like you said, although not as far as I think most people have writing them off. But, look, I mean, what happens with Westbrook? I mean, does he just resort back to, like, when he had Durant kind of type of Westbrook, but, like, a less good Durant? I don't understand. Like, he went from sharing the ball with the best scorer in the league to doing literally everything. Does he just, like, pretend that never happened? I don't really understand exactly how it's going to work or they're still going to center everything around Westbrook and just hope that George, like, capitalizes on whatever chances he gets, or when Westbrook's on the bench. I think Billy Donovan's going to have to figure that out. And Donovan's a good coach. I think they'll figure something out and obviously, I think they'll be a 50-win team, if just barely. But I wonder what happens to MVP Westbrook. Does he go away, or does Paul George just take a severely diminished role? Because it has to be one or the other, right?
Who going into next year has the biggest drop off from MVP form? James Harden or Russell Westbrook?
It's a good question, and it's just, look, Harden's going to have to share the ball a lot. He's probably going to be starting at the 2 instead of the 1. So that's, like, the obvious choice because he's switching back to his old position. But at the same time, I mean, Westbrook literally did everything, Julian. Everything. I don't know if they keep that straight up because, I mean, look, I could be wrong, but to me it just seems like OKC's one goal last year was to win Westbrook an MVP.
Mm-hmm.
And they accomplished it. And that was able to help them get leverage in bringing in another star in Paul George. But now I don't know if they go back to square one or if they hang on to – I don't know what to expect from them. I think probably Harden is the answer. But at the same time, it's a politics game because Paul George, his contract is done at the end of the year, and you can risk losing him. And guess what? Westbrook hasn't signed his extension either.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing to watch is Westbrook hasn't signed his extension either. So it's a matter of what worked for you last year. How do we utilize what we've got new in Paul George And also, how do we keep everybody happy? And of course, winning is what fixes everything. But I don't think Paul George is going to stick around in dumpy Oklahoma City watching the Russell Westbrook show and get bounced in the first or second round when he can go to LA, run the show, also get bounced in the first round probably, and still be making the same money. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, to that point, if Russell Westbrook joins him in LA, they could at least turn that into a second round exit, and LeVar Ball will get, I don't know. I figured LeVar Ball had to be mentioned in there somewhere. Also, I want to take a stab at answering my own question. I find it really interesting that you think that Harden would be the obvious answer. My thinking was that because Russell Westbrook literally did everything for OKC, and I don't think he's going to have a repeat year where his teammates are going to be like, hey, let's get him a second straight MVP in a row. And now that he has another dependent scorer in Paul George, I think that MVP form will drop. I'm not going to say Russell Westbrook's going to turn into a 6-man or a 15-point scorer, but we're not going to get nearly the same Russell Westbrook that we got last year. Whereas James Harden, I think his setup in Houston is just a lot better. His offense, the way the coaching system is with Mike D'Antoni, is a better situation, and not to mention he gets a better point guard around him in Chris Paul. So even though he won't be at that point guard position, I think his numbers will at least be a lot closer to MVP form than Russell Westbrook's will. But I am with you on the fact that Russell Westbrook and the Oklahoma City Thunder, as good as this acquisition is, literally highway robbery, you get a top player for scraps. It's not good enough to knock off the Kings of the Western Conference, a stacked Western Conference, mind you.
Now that we have all these superstar pairings, last year the MVP race was headlined by Harden and Westbrook, who lost Howard and Durant. Now that they have superstars back in their lives, who's the favorite for MVP going into this year? Is it Kawhi? Is it Giannis? I don't know.
I think, and I'm on record saying that Giannis is, from this past year, 2 years away from being an MVP. So maybe this year he starts having a really good year and he puts himself in that MVP. Kawhi Leonard, obviously, is obviously was a prime candidate for the MVP. He was a distant third, but I mean, Kawhi Leonard is arguably the best all-around player in the league. And there's a guy in Cleveland. He's pretty good too. He's still in peak form. He has a pretty good chance at the MVP as well. Jabron Ames, his name rhymes with that.
I could see Kyle Korver competing for MVP this year.
The NBA is a 3-point shooters league, right? Why not?
It is. Real quick, with Jimmy Butler, how good is Minnesota this year?
That's a pretty good team. They're not top 5. They're a playoff team.
Top 5 in the league or top 5 in the West?
They're not top 5 in the West.
Really?
I think they're 6.
Really? Who do you have ahead of them? I'd love to hear this.
Actually, that's actually a good question. They might. You know what? They might actually. I might reconsider that.
I think they're going to be in that 4-5 matchup. I really do. And look, their defense was horrible this year. They have a lot of young guys.
Yeah.
And but it's Thibodeau. He was coaching the best team in the league for 3 straight years at one point in Chicago. So he's got his guy Jimmy Butler back. They've added some nice pieces. Teague, veteran point guard.
That's true.
Jamal Crawford can still get buckets.
Wow. I think I might have underrated the Minnesota Timberwolves. Wow.
This is year 3 for Towns. I think he's just ready to explode. I think he's going to be unbelievably good. Top 10 player in the NBA. This is the year for him. I'm excited for Minnesota. They're going to make the playoffs for sure, and I think they could even fight for home court. I think they fall a little bit short, but I think they'll be in the hunt towards the end. In April.
Are they a better team than OKC?
I don't think so. It depends on a number of things, obviously injuries and the dynamic of Westbrook and George, like we talked about earlier. And really, if guys like Wiggins and Towns truly step up and go out and win some ball games, which they haven't proven they can done quite yet. But it's intriguing. I'm telling you, I like what's going on in Minnesota. I really do.
No doubt. No doubt. I think with what Tom Thibodeau's been able, I mean, he's there now. He gets to work with Jimmy Butler. Karl Anthony Towns is a beast. They've got a really good setup there, and that's a team that's going to be great for years to come. Whether or not they're going to, I mean, whether or not when we start seeing them winning championships, that's a whole other different story. But I don't know. Wow, I completely forgot about Jeff Teague being there. And I mean, it's one thing to be like, all right, you have a good young core, you add Jimmy Butler, it'll be good. But you're adding some solid veterans around them. That's a team. That's a great recipe. You know what? I will put them at 5. I'll put them at 5.
I'm glad I could convince you.
Yeah.
All right. 30 minutes in, we got to get to some baseball, but just real quickly, should the Rockets really trade for Melo? Do you think that's a good idea?
I'm just laughing because you did. For those of you who are familiar with our past episodes, you know, at least the one where Jake Lapen thought of 40 players better than Carmelo Anthony, and now thinking of Carmelo potentially being on his team. Oh man, and think about it, 3 guys who really want the ball in their hand.
Yeah.
Could he play for the Houston Rockets?
Let me just tell you right now, if Melo comes to the Rockets, the ball is not going to be in his hands nearly as much as it's been in his career.
And that's something he has to accept.
It just based on all the talks they've had that the trade is on the 2-yard line, I mean, and the fact that he wants to join his buddy Chris Paul in Houston, if that's not admitting that, okay, I'm willing to take this Chris Bosh diminished role, 3rd string, then if that's not a sign, then I don't know what is, honestly. Like, look, Melo, you are a great scorer. You are. Or at least in the past you've been. But there's no way in hell you are taking the ball out of Harden or Chris Paul's hands, literally, unless they are both decapitated. I'm telling you, he is spotting up, and he can create off of spotting up. But he's not running that offense. Maybe just a few minute stretches when Harden needs a break or Chris Paul needs a break. But that is it. I'm telling you. He has to accept that role or it will not work. And I'm all for acquiring talent, like we said, in this era of the Warriors' domination. I get it, and I think I'll be happy either way because this offense will hum with Ryan Anderson at the 4. It really will. That won't be an issue. But adding Melo as just another guy who can potentially take over at some point if Harden's struggling like he did in Game 6, it sounds good in theory, but he really has to buy in that he is the 3rd option. And he already has had Mike D'Antoni as his coach, and it did not go well. The second he got hurt, they started winning because Jeremy Lin started going off with Linsanity because D'Antoni is the point guard whisperer. So it already hasn't worked once, and the fact that they're both willing to work this out is a good sign, but it doesn't mean it'll work out necessarily. Like, things could change. So that's a huge concern of mine, is the fact that they've already had a falling out. So unless Melo is legitimately ready to say, okay, I'm the 3rd option, then I do not want this trade to happen. But signs are pointing to the fact that he is. And if he truly is, then I think it's a great move for the Houston Rockets. You can't turn down a guy like Carmelo Anthony.
Very, very quickly, just trying to remember where I read this, but Mike D'Antoni, I think, was asked about his relationship with Carmelo. And he did acknowledge, yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of a falling out in New York, but it seems as if the two don't necessarily, hate each other. You'll have players who, I'm not playing for that coach at all. He's a terrible coach, so. It's just that, Mike wanted to play a certain way, Melo wanted to play a certain way. And as you've already acknowledged to, if Melo is willing to be that secondary guy, he's willing to come to Houston to do this, part of it has to mean he's accepted that Mike D'Antoni, I'm going to have to kind of play his way and adjust to being this secondary player. And, I mean, I don't know if it's just because I'm thinking about this a little positively, but Carmelo Anthony as a secondary player, you all these people are so occupied with James Harden and Chris Paul, you free the game up, and maybe Carmelo Anthony as a spot up shooter, or you give him some opportunities just to shoot. I don't know. I mean, if you don't have to rely on him as much, that's a deadly secondary option. And going back to that Golden State Houston series, that's a shootout. It's a shootout.
Yeah, I mean, this is an overly simplistic way to look at it, but just imagine the Knicks playing the Spurs, right? And you got Carmelo Anthony being guarded by Kawhi Leonard, and who's he going to kick it out to? Derrick Rose, Ron Baker, I mean, Justin Holiday, right? Now think of it as Kawhi and the Spurs versus Rockets and Kawhi on James Harden. You got Danny Green maybe on Chris Paul, and then you have Melo on LaMarcus Aldridge. I don't know, Bertans. Like, literally, think about it. It's a huge step for Melo having the first, not the first premier defender, but the first two premier defenders already occupied. That's something Melo has never seen in his career, and that's intriguing to me.
He could end up very well saving his career off that, and not just being this money grubber who ended up, being this player that Jake Lapen did not see as a top 40 player because he played in New York.
Any last minute things you want to get in on this NBA offseason? Maybe a surprising sign or a low key brilliant signing before we move on here to baseball?
I won't point out a brilliant signing. I'll just point out how sad the Eastern Conference is, because obviously pretty much most of the All-Stars have departed over to the Western Conference. And as good as Boston looks going into, I mean, they look pretty decent with, Isaiah Thomas is still there. Gordon Hayward is there. That being said, they had to get rid of Avery Bradley to make that work. Look at the Eastern Conference. It's still Cleveland's to win.
Yeah.
Boston is not going to topple them. Toronto, they locked up Kyle Lowry in the offseason. They lost Patrick Patterson, which, I know Patrick Patterson is one way, but he was a decent secondary player for them. They locked up Serge Ibaka, and they have a decent team, but they're not going to do much of anything. Maybe Milwaukee makes another step this year, but there's a bunch of teams there that are decent, but they're just it's a barren wasteland in the Eastern Conference as far as I'm concerned when you're comparing it to the Western Conference. And maybe it's time for all of us to start, just getting rid of our Eastern bias and get that NBA League Pass and just watch more Western Conference games, because it's just going to be way more fun.
Yeah, I think I saw an article saying that the West could make two All-Star teams that would be better than the Eastern All-Star team based on last year's player rankings. One of those guys to leave the East was Paul Millsap to Denver. I think Denver makes the playoffs this year. I love that Millsap-Jokic pairing. I think that can cause some serious damage. Also, low-key signing I did like was KCP to the Lakers. I found was interesting. Obviously, he got into a little bit of legal trouble. Pistons let him go. 1-year deal out in L.A. I want to see what he can do because he's playing for big money this time. And also, Swaggy P on the Warriors, I think, should be a lot of fun.
Swaggy P. We're in a time where JaVale McGee has a ring.
Yeah. We're basically at the point where, what kooky players can hop onto the Warriors and win a ring now? That's where we are. And Swaggy P appears to be the next in line along with Omri Caspi. All right, let's get on to some baseball. All-Star break, obviously. Julian, did you watch any of the festivities from this past week?
I caught a bit of the home run derby. I usually make it a point to try to at least watch some of the festivities. I don't end up watching all of the All-Star games, but this is a good time of the year for me because I believe I've mentioned it on the show, or if you know me enough, you'll know this. There's so many games in Major League Baseball, it's really hard for me to give a damn in the first half of the year. But the All-Star break is here, which means my give a damn meter is slowly starting to creep up, which means teams could, they could start to get hot during the All-Star break. They could find a way to claw into that wild card spot, or they cement their position as division leaders. So, you know what? I'm happy the All-Star break is here because I can start to give way more of a damn about baseball than I would. I mean, you're already way ahead of me in that trek. But no, I caught a bit of the All-Star game festivities. I'm happy to see Aaron Judge. I'll divulge a little bit more on him later. But no, looks like there was some decent activity going on there and a lot of bats. And this was like what, the first year without that crazy rule about a winner of the All-Star game gets home field advantage in Major League Baseball.
It was the first time in a long time, and we're gonna get to that later. As an employee of MLB Network, I'm inclined to disagree that baseball is boring the first half, especially not the way it's been going for my Houston Astros, who reached 60 wins before the All-Star break. Pretty phenomenal achievement for them. 6 All-Stars total, but it didn't really help the American League's cause. Correa, Springer, and Altuve all 0 for 2. Altuve now 0 for 8 in All-Star games. The last Houston Astro to get a hit in an All-Star game was for the National League, as a matter of fact. Hunter Pence back in 2011. Chris Davinsky did throw a scoreless inning, though, and he was a late-minute ad. He's part of the new wave of relief aces, and the guy's a stud. Well-deserved. Glad he was able to sneak in due to injury, perhaps, but nonetheless, good for him. Home run derby. Aaron Judge, like you mentioned, dude is a monster. I'm not positive he's actually a human being, Julian.
I think he's a cyborg. The only other athlete I could ever think of, there are 2 other athletes I could think of who I've ever given the title cyborg to. Calvin Johnson, and only because of how mechanical and methodical this guy is, Peyton Manning. Those are the only other athletes I've ever thought, you know what, this person may be a cyborg. When you think of baseball players and you look at Aaron Judge's, type, his size, and his ability to just crush stuff, like, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And I really want this guy to succeed. I know he had a small lull at the halfway point of the first half of the year, but this kid could very well be the face of the game as early as next year, because there's nobody really like him, and he is turning into the star player for the New York Yankees now. And I'm really happy he was able to win Home Run Derby, and maybe if he so chooses, this could be the beginning of him winning like 3 or 4 of these.
Yeah, he's definitely an exciting player, especially earlier on when the Yankees were killing it. He was well on his way for being the face of MLB, still probably is. Yankees have cooled down a lot.
Yes.
We can talk about that in a second. Aaron Judge, though, look, it's not just that he has the power. He's hitting 326, Julian. The guy's killing. Has Triple Crown numbers right now. And I think an important point to be made is a lot of people see him as this up-and-coming guy, like Rookie of the Year, like for sure already. He's got it in the bag. He broke Joe DiMaggio's Yankees record for rookie home runs in a season before the All-Star break. He's already beaten that record. But he's 25. And I'm not saying 25 is old because he probably still has 15 years ahead of him. But I think it's interesting. He's Rookie of the Year candidate, first All-Star game at 25. Bryce Harper just played in his 5th All-Star game. You know how old Bryce Harper is? 24. And Bryce Harper's a special case, but I just think that's an important distinction. He's not some bright, young guy. He's 25. He hit 170 last September, so I think the fact that he's labeled a rookie he's like barely labeled a rookie, so I think that's also worth noting.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no arguing with the stats. Honestly, if he keeps this average up, he's on his way to one of the all-time great seasons if he keeps his average up.
Absolutely, man. I'm just happy to see that boy shine, man. I'm telling you, man. And from a marketing standpoint, I mean, we're starting to see how Major League Baseball has this problem. They have these star players like a Bryce Harper or a Mike Trout, and I know they had that really cool commercial a few months ago where they showcased all those guys and the Mets rotation, and it seems as if not a lot of people are kind of driving for it, but it seems as if they have some kind of slight marketing problem where they have these stars, they're just not marketable. Maybe Aaron Judge is that player that breaks that mold. Maybe he's just exciting enough to get way more people outside of, diehard MLB fans to really buy into. Maybe he could break that mold as well. Maybe I'm also just talking out of my ass. I don't know.
It's one of those things where people say, people who think the first half is boring anyway, maybe, they say that MLB players aren't athletes. Look, Aaron Judge could be playing on Sundays. I'll tell you that right now. Aaron Judge could be playing tight end every Sunday and would do a hell of a job. I'm curious though, has he already run away with MVP in your mind, or is it still a competition?
It's still a competition because it's the halfway point of the year, and I mean, with regards to home runs anyway, it's not like he's like 15 home runs up on anybody. I mean, it's very possible he could go through yet another rut during the year, and it ends up being close. That being said, as of right now, wins above replacement, offensive WAR, slugging percentage, home runs, Aaron Judge is leading all of that right now. And there's a whole bunch of other categories I can get into as well. But while I won't say he's run away with it and he's got that locked up, Aaron Judge, as of right now, is the front runner for AL MVP.
I'd have to agree, and it depends on if the Yankees can finish off strong. Maybe even not. We saw Trout win it last year when the Angels were a complete disaster. I think what's working in Judge's advantage is I think the next three candidates all come from the same team, and that is Springer, Altuve, and Correa. All three of them having phenomenal years. It's just everything going right for Houston right now. Destined to go wrong at some point, I'm sure. But I think because they have 6 All-Stars, because they have these 3 guys who are all killing it, it's hard to define one as the true MVP, kind of like a same situation, whereas it'd be hard to give Durant or Steph Curry the MVP. It's just so much star power coming from one team that it's hard to say, okay, that guy is the most valuable guy carrying that team because they're getting it from everywhere. But Springer is truly on a historic pace to shatter all these records from the leadoff spot. The record for RBIs by a leadoff hitter is 100, and Springer's on pace to have like 132. I mean, that's just insane. And part of it is because, yeah, the Astros are that deep. They have phenomenal 7, 8, 9 production. And he's also got Altuve and Correa coming up right after him. So I think it's going to be hard for an Astro to take home MVP just because so many are doing so well. I really do.
It's a lot closer in the National League if we're thinking of MVPs. I know I don't want to jump too far off in the schedule, but I mean, I think Aaron Judge is the front runner there. I don't know if you have a clear cut MVP in that league in mind. One guy I'd like. I mean, right now he doesn't look like an absolute leader as of yet, but one guy who's always kind of sleeping under and he bats really well. One guy who I'd like to see kind of step up, get hot, and maybe make himself a case. I'd like to see Paul Goldschmidt do well and eventually get himself that MVP this year. It's a guy who's in the top 10 in WAR as well, for WAR for position players as well, and 4th in on-base percentage, tied for 10th in slugging percentage. But right now, if I could pick a leader for that NL MVP, I think Joey Votto has a case of being NL MVP as well. That's a guy who's in the top 3 in home runs as well. Also could be found in the top 10 for wins above replacement. Thought he had a better batting average, though. That being said, I think Joey Votto was another candidate for NL MVP. I think it's a lot closer there.
Yeah, I think it's much more of an open race. It's not just between Aaron Judge or the Astros. But Votto having a great year, like you said. The Reds, though, are just going to be completely out of it, and I think that takes him out of the picture for me as well. Goldie and the Diamondbacks are having a hell of a year, and thank God, I'm happy for him that they're finally competing.
Yes.
And he's absolutely leading the charge, and I would not be surprised to see him hold up this trophy when it's all said and done. Another name I want to throw out there, I don't think he's quite there yet, but I think he's in the mix and could have a strong second half, and that's Nolan Arenado. And I think that's just because if voters just appreciate his defense, it's historically great. He has a new highlight every single day, and he's getting it done from the plate too. And the Rockies are also very much in that crowded NL West. And it's similar for the Dodgers like the Astros. 5 All-Stars, hard to pick a guy. Bellinger's great, but probably already got Rookie of the Year, and I think that might sway some voters from giving him MVP votes. And same thing with pitchers. They're probably not going to get a lot of MVP votes unless they have a truly dominant season. I think Kershaw could finish near the top of MVP voting, but I don't expect him to run away with it by any means. So I think Arenado has a shot if he has a strong second half to take away that hardware. While we're talking about pitching Cy Young, I know I mentioned Kershaw, but you got to look out for Max Scherzer in the NL.
Ooh, you're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I think Clayton Kershaw is going to end up being my pick for NL Cy Young. Obviously, year in, year out, he ends up being probably the best regular season pitcher. The playoffs could be a different story. That's a guy who brings it for those I was almost going to say 162 games, but he brings in the regular season, and I would not be surprised. But I'm with you on that. I think Max Scherzer, the dominant starter he is for Washington, that's another guy to look out for as well. Could be a nice 1-2 race for the rest of the year. But my pick is going to be Clayton Kershaw from here on out.
Look, Kershaw was inactive for the All-Star game, so it didn't matter, but that would have been a very tough choice for Joe Madden who to pick. Clayton Kershaw has never actually started an All-Star game. That's pretty crazy to think about.
I never knew. That's crazy.
For so long now. I got to lean in favor of Scherzer. They're both on pace to get 300 strikeouts, which hasn't been done since Pedro. I mean, that would be truly outstanding for both of them. And honestly, throw a dart, kind of like NBA. Just throw a dart, and either of them is very deserving. What about in the American League? Who are you looking at over there?
Only because who did you pick? I think we might have the same one.
Look, I'll just keep it simple here. Sticking with the All-Star starter theme, Chris Sale. This is his award to lose. And the thing is, though, it's been his award to lose for 3 straight years now, arguably. And he's lost it every time with horrible second halves. And I think part of that is just because the White Sox are so out of it that he was kind of out of it, and he wasn't happy there. Now that he's in Boston, he's loving it. He's revived. There's new life, and he's in a baseball town, and they're in first place. I think he gets it done, gets the Cy Young, and I think he thanks Dallas Keuchel, who's 9-0, for getting hurt.
Yeah, Chris Sale now in Boston, he looks like a cut above, if I say so myself. I was actually surprised that you didn't end up picking Keuchel, actually. I would have liked to have seen him be the AL Cy Young guy.
He's just been out for too long. Unless he comes back after All-Star break and remains undefeated, I don't see it happening. But look, his numbers, what he done, he was clearly on pace to get Cy Young.
Absolutely.
Low 2 ERA, hasn't lost a game, but he's been out for quite a while now. He's missed numbers starts, and I think that works heavily in Sale's favor.
So what about
moving on? I touched on it a little with Bellinger and rookies. Do you have any other rookies?
Oh, wow. I almost forgot about rookies. I almost skipped over that. Bellinger would have been my guy in the NL, in the American League. This is where me not giving a damn about the first season starts to show up. I don't have a pick for the AL.
Look, it's Aaron Judge.
Really? We put him all in the MVP already.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of him as a rookie now because he's 25.
And he played last year, which I think is a rule.
But he didn't play all that much last year.
No, not that much. But it's not like he was. I don't know. It's just he's not a rookie. He's played Major League Baseball before this season. That's how I feel about it. But I'm not going to argue that they give him this award because that rule exists and he's clearly deserving.
I almost did not have an AL pick. I completely forgot about Aaron Judge being a rookie. That's how good he is.
Any managers you want to toss out there? I don't think there's any surprises here, at least for me.
I'm gonna give a vote to Dave Roberts in the NL, and in the American League, nah, I don't really have a vote in the. You know what's funny? If you consider I watched enough Blue Jays games, I should have an AL pick. But that being said, I think the fact that Houston is doing really well this year, I'll chalk it up to their manager as well. His name has completely slipped my mind, unfortunately.
Look, you can't argue with AJ Hinch. The Astros are rolling right now. I think that would be my pick as well, especially because no other team is with even close to 60 games right now. I think AJ Hinch is the obvious answer, regardless of all the talent the Astros have. He's doing a good job managing it. And at one point in time, they had 4 of their opening day 5 starters from their rotation on the DL and barely skipped a beat. They've had a lot of guys fill in, and I think Hinch has done a tremendous job managing all those injuries in the bullpen. Got to give him the nod right now. As far as the NL, Dave Roberts, same thing. Dodgers 61 wins. They are humming. If anyone has a chance, I think Bud Black, the Rockies, they've been bad for a number of years now. They're finally starting to get things going, looking like they ought to make the playoffs this year out west in the best division in baseball right now. So I think that's an interesting name, and he will get some votes, but I think this is Hinch and Roberts awards they're going to run away with when it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on baseball? I got one for you. How about a bold prediction for the second half of the season?
Okay.
Anything. What you got? Anything.
Okay. This isn't in terms of a bold prediction for the rest of the year. I think the LA Dodgers have some kind of drop off, and that NL West ends up going to Arizona. I think right now, the Dodgers have this lead, and I mean, it's maybe going too well for them. It's totally possible that maybe in August they just drop, and that NL West becomes a dogfight. That would be my bold prediction.
That is incredibly bold. That's the type of boldness that got you that Toronto Maple Leafs shirt that you're supposed to be wearing right now when going with the Cavs to win the finals.
This is blue?
Not sure what you were thinking there. I think all the division leaders right now will hold on. That's my bold prediction. It's not even that bold. But I'm going to take it a step further. The Yankees, who got off to a great start, I have them missing the playoffs, and it'll really be spectacular. There's, in terms of the wild card, it's hard to imagine the Yankees not grabbing at least the second wild card. But sticking with the theme of bold, I think the Royals finally are in a groove, and that's a good team that won the World Series a couple years ago and still have a lot of those pieces, so you can't really count them out. Tampa Bay's in the mix. I don't know if I trust them. And you're going to like this, Julian. I think Toronto just dug such a deep hole at the beginning that when it's all said and done, I think they can make it interesting, maybe even sneak in as a second wild card.
Really? Really? Because
is underperforming right now, but Smoke is on fire. Donaldson is nowhere to go but up. Still got Batista, Morales, Travis will come back from injury. Tulo, that lineup's too good.
Okay, well,
the pitching has underperformed as well. Liriano's having a tough year. Hap's not having an as amazing year as he was last year. Sanchez can't stay healthy, but if he can get those blisters in order, this team has the pieces to do it. They are a good team that started off terribly. I think there's enough time they can make it happen. I'm not saying they will, but I will not be surprised if they do.
That's funny because my not so bold prediction was that I think it's not so bold. I think the Blue Jays have dug themselves so deep into a hole, they're not going to touch 500 baseball maybe until the rest of the year. And I think it's going to get to a point because the management that's in place there, they pretty much more or less wanted to do this since they came in. I'm thinking about Mark Shapiro, the president. They've been angling to try to, start the tear down of the Toronto Blue Jays. And I know you can't deal away Troy Tulowitzki, but Josh Donaldson's a guy who's picked up some trade talks. And I think the Jays are going to be in a position where this team might not be good enough to compete anymore, and we're having that bad of a year. Maybe we're starting to sell. Maybe it's time for us to sell off our assets, and Josh Donaldson goes to a contender. I don't think they'll deal Stroman because he's a young enough player you can build around, but Josh Donaldson's a guy who leaves.
Yeah, Donaldson's name has come up a lot in trade talks, but I think they're just gauging interest. I think they're only 5 games under. They're not.
Oh, for sure. They're not out of it.
There are a lot of teams in worse shape. I think they hang on and finish out the season, and then they take it from there, depending on what happens. We're at the hour point almost anyway, but it wouldn't be an episode of the Faceoff without doing a little bit of our big deal or no deal game that we have done a lot in the past. And we're going to start with Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. A lot of hype going on in this fight. Seen them yapping at each other on their tour as they promote their fight coming up. It feels like this has the most hype since arguably Pacquiao Mayweather. I'm wondering, Julian, do you think this fight will end up being a big deal or no deal?
Well, the fight's going to end up being a big deal because of the guys that are, in terms of hype and the pay-per-view sales, yes, In
Well,
terms of the actual fight itself,
let me just interrupt you really quick. The hype is leading into the fight. I'm saying it when it's all said and done.
it's all said and done. No, because it's gonna be it's not gonna be that big of a deal, because if you've seen enough of Floyd Mayweather's fights, you know how he is. He doesn't go out and say, you know what, I'm gonna knock you out. He gets his jabs in and he just defends, evades. Not to mention that Conor McGregor going up against the undefeated champ that is Floyd Mayweather, strictly boxing. There's no going to the ground, no ground and pound, nothing like that. I don't think he's gonna find some upset victory in him and find a way to beat Mayweather. That being said, just looking at this fight, see, here's the thing with between this fight, the difference between this fight and Mayweather Pacquiao. Like those Mayweather Pacquiao, those were two fighters who were so good in their primes. We really want to see them go at it. And years later, Mayweather way past his prime. He's clearly just doing this for the money. Conor McGregor, same deal. And to be quite honest, I really don't care for either guy. Usually in these fights, I think, you know what, Mayweather's so. Maybe I'll go for, for just throwing him out there, Oscar De La Hoya, for example. Or you know what, Pacquiao's kind of so. You know what, I'll side with Mayweather this time. In a perfect world, I don't want to pick either guy. I just want both these guys to just kind of knock each other out and they just rule the fight like a no decision or something. There's nothing to like about either of these guys. What's also making me sick is just seeing these little promo runs that are going on now. I have no interest in buying into that hype. So I'm not going to be buying any pay-per-view to watch this fight. I didn't say I wouldn't watch the fight. I'm just not going to pay pay-per-view for it.
Oh, I'll definitely be watching, and this was probably the first fight that I'll pay to watch since Pacquiao Mayweather. And I'm with you. Mayweather's getting up there. He's 40 years old now, but I don't see McGregor getting to him. He's an escape artist, and he's damn good at it, and that's how he's gotten to where he is today. And McGregor's so cocky, he already gave himself this, I'm going to knock him out in under 4 rounds, which is really just a death sentence for him, because that's not how you're going to beat Mayweather, because he's going to keep running and get his hits in. So I think people are going to be disappointed, just like they were for Mayweather Pacquiao. People who don't truly appreciate that boxing isn't an animalistic punk metal go get 'em. It's more of a smooth jazz where you pick and choose your moments, and Mayweather's the best at it, and there's a reason he's the best at it, even if it's not the most aesthetically pleasing to younger people who are not really familiar with the sport. I just see it happening all over again. It's hard to imagine Mayweather losing, probably because he's never lost in near 50 tries. So, I don't know. I'll eat my words if McGregor comes out and gets it done. I will, but I'd be surprised.
Let's just get to the fight and just get this over with. Okay, let's go to the next topic.
Okay, the ESPYs last night. Good time, good show. Not a lot of surprising awards given out. Most people were pretty deserving. Not really a lot of snubs or surprises. But there was an interesting moment in the monologue, and I know you're with me on this, Julian. Peyton Manning calls out Kevin Durant, says the women's U.S. gymnastics team did so well that Durant wants to join the team, and KD was not having it. He did not appreciate it, was not amused in any way whatsoever. Is this a big deal or is it no deal?
No big deal. Just watching it live. Well, sorry, not live. I watched after the fact. Watching it, for about 5 seconds, I thought, okay, this is hilarious, and Kevin Durant looks really pissed. Seconds 6, 7, and 8, I thought, oh my God, this is probably a joke. Like, Kevin Durant probably, was asked to look really pissed off. And I mean, the fact that they got Russell Westbrook in on this too, something had to be up. And sure enough, I saw this tweet out today. Crispy Haynes from ESPN tweeted out, in fact, that it was a joke. Like, it was a setup. So, Kevin Durant wasn't actually pissed. He totally bought it, totally sold it to everyone else, and we all bought it. But, yeah, it's not actually a big deal. and I didn't think it was going to be a big deal anyway.
I don't know, man. If Kevin Durant was truly acting in that moment, then I think Thunderstruck, the movie, would have been a lot better because that was pretty convincing acting job. He looked legitimately pissed, and then I thought Peyton looked legitimately nervous after saying it, and then Russ did a real good job of just covering his mouth as soon as possible. I don't know, man. If Haynes says it's all a joke, then I believe him, but in the moment, I really thought it might be a big deal because if Kevin Durant can't laugh about that, then that's a serious problem for him because it's not going to go away. He's not going to live this down. It's going to keep on coming. What he's done to the entire sport, it's going to keep on coming. So let's hope he was joking. Let's hope. All right, what else we got? The All-Star game, like we mentioned earlier, no longer decides home field advantage, as people know. It used to decide whether the American League or National League won, that whichever team represented that league in the World Series would have home field advantage. Now it'll be determined just by best record, like they do in the NBA. Julian, is this a big deal or no deal?
It's a big deal. I mean, we can now go into a World Series and have these two great teams there and realize, okay, you know what? The best team actually has home field advantage. So I can agree with that. That being said, I didn't mind the fact that the All-Star game had the home field advantage for the World Series in the balance. I think that was just it just made the All-Star game for MLB way different than all these other games, which were just basically just for posterity. Everyone kind of half-asses the game. The NBA game one I like because at least by the second half, sometimes people realize, hey, you know what? This could still be a game, and you get to see someone really show out and play. In Major League Baseball, we've seen quite a few iconic moments with the game mattering as much as it does for that home field advantage. So I'm actually kind of sad to see it go. It's a big deal.
I absolutely 100% agree with you on everything there. Look, it's probably better for whichever teams actually do make it and whether they're deserving of home field or not. But that was the one thing that set this All-Star game apart. Like the NBA All-Star game is a joke. Nobody plays defense, and God, don't get me started on the Pro Bowl. I mean, who even watches that shit anymore?
It's the worst of any pro league.
And now already, like, we're hearing, like, these ideas of, like, Bryce Harper says, oh, we should have captains now that it doesn't count. So, like, you could pick your team. So, like, maybe he could face Max Scherzer because he's always wanted to do that. Like, look, no. Like, baseball has such a rich history, and a lot of that is AL versus NL. I mean, they are truly indistinguishable. I mean, they're truly distinguishable. Excuse me.
Yes.
And interleague play used to be such a rarity, and now that it's not, we've kind of lost this competition. But I think the players did a pretty good job. Like when Cano hit the go-ahead home run, it looked like the players were legitimately excited to win that game. So I like that, and I just hope they can keep that fire because we're 1 year removed. But think about 15 years from now, a completely new generation of players. Are they going to feel that same way about winning or losing that game, or are they going to go for behind-the-back catches and who knows what else, like trick plays, just like they do in the NBA? That's not what I want to see. I want to see a competitive game. I think that's the one thing that the baseball All-Star game had going for it over all these other All-Star weekends. All right, lastly, Julian, I hate that we always got to bring up this guy, but we do. Lonzo Ball in the Summer League has a not-so-great first game, 2 of 15 from the field, has a triple-double the second game, but we're talking Rajon Rondo triple-double, 11, 11, 11 across the board. And then the other night, 36, 11, and 8. A huge game, never been done before, a 30 and 10 assist game in Summer League history. But he had a big baller game and some not-so-big baller shoes, wearing the Kobe's instead of the BBBs. What do you think about that? Big deal or no deal?
It's Summer League, so it shouldn't be a big deal. But it's LeVar Ball's kid wearing wearing Kobe's. It's a big deal. It's a big deal in my mind. This is a guy who is the face of the... Well, actually, you could make the argument that it's either him or LeVar Ball who's the face of the Big Baller brand. But they've been championing that brand for how many months?
Yeah.
And the one great game in Summer League, mind you, the one great game Lonzo Ball has in Nikes, the company that like literally threw you out of the, well, maybe not literally, but they pretty much said they laughed off the idea of coming together with the big baller brand. You know, those are the guys you're fighting against. That's a huge deal in my mind. That being said, I mean, it is Summer League. I mean, these games aren't really, these games don't really matter. I mean, the good prospects, they're supposed to be good. That's expected of them. Obviously, the first game where Lonzo Ball did not play well, that stuck out like a sore thumb. And then he ends up getting the triple-double, which I believe is the first triple-double recorded in a Summer League game since '08. But that's also around when they started counting stats for real anyway. So who knows? Maybe someone had a triple-double before that. But for him to ball out in Nikes, I don't know about you, but I think Nike. If I'm working at Nike right now, I have an ad idea that I'm quickly typing up. We're one of those like anti-big baller brand ads, so it's a big deal.
I'm just glad triple doubles are still a big deal because I was worried those would fade out after Russell Westbrook last year.
Let it go.
No, I guess there are worse shoes he could have worn than Kobe's. Let's put it that way. If he was wearing KD's or Harden's or Starburys or who knows what, I mean,
Shaq's.
They're Kobe's for the Lakers. But you're right. That's pathetic that they're going to charge that much for that shoe and that he's not even going to wear them. I think that's a bigger storyline than anything going on the rest of Summer League, honestly. And I want to get this weird brag in. Despite just starting a job at MLB Network, I have watched every single Rockets Summer League game as I always do. It's an annual tradition, and I want all the credit for that. I do.
Credit.
Thank you very much, Julian. This was fun, man. It's been too long.
It has been way too long. Can we make this a weekly thing?
It will absolutely be a weekly thing. The Faceoff is back, folks. For better or for worse, we're here doing these live YouTube, Skype sessions, Google Hangouts, rather. Got to give the right people credit. We're also going to get the audio going on Mixcloud and iTunes, as we always do, throwing a little bit of the music, the intro, so we can get that going because we know that's what people like. That's what the people want to hear. Mm-hmm. Julian, anything else you want to add?
Follow us on our socials. My Twitter handle has changed. It is no longer Julian the Intern. It is JKA McKenzie, as has yours.
As has mine. At Jake Lapin _MLB. Was hoping to get a lot more followers that way instead of SYR, but so far I've only gotten a couple. But it's early. I think once we hit the MLB playoffs, things will change. Things will start going up. We'll see.
For sure, Ben. And hopefully around that time, that's when this podcast will start heating up again. Well, I mean, we'll definitely be like blazing at that point, but then it'll be like a heating inferno come like September, October.
Sounds good to me. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We can't do it without you. Jake Lapin signing off for Julian McKenzie as well. Thanks for watching the return of the Face-Off. It is good to be back. We will see you next week. Have a good one.
Thanks for